We're back once again. And we've spoken a lot about mentorship, right? Mentorship has been one of those things that was mentioned in the first welcome remarks. And then, of course, with Janvi and Belinda earlier on. And we're delighted to have two very comical Irish gentlemen who are amusing us backstage here, debating on which city is the best, but we'll leave them up to it. And they're really going to be talking about building meaningful and impactful mentorships. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage Stephen Shortt, who's the managing director over at ETC Consult and Distributed Training, and Chris Kelly, who's the CEO and co-founder of Tracworx. Over to you, gentlemen. Enjoy the conversation.
Thank you very much. Chris, how are we doing?
Not too bad, Stephen. How are you?
Very good. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us this evening, this afternoon, this morning, wherever it is that you are in the world. Chris and myself are both from the greatest country in the world, Ireland. I'm from Dublin, and Chris is unfortunately from somewhere less important than Dublin. So we are going to talk to you today a little bit. So I was backstage, and Chris and I were separately backstage, watching Johnny and Belinda talking about mentorship in the last session. And there was some really, really important takeaways that they had in that session about how important mentorship is. But what we're going to talk to you about for the next little while, and we encourage you to have, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat, and we'll try and get to as many of them as we can. We're going to talk to you about building those mentorship relationships and how do you, as students, get the strong relationships that you want, get what you need out of the relationship, and how you can actually give back and how it's beneficial to both the mentor and the mentee. So, Chris, you and I both met through this phenomenal organization, which is the Global Student Entrepreneur Awards. Chris represented Ireland in Thailand,
2016. Yeah, 2016, long time ago.
So Chris was the best student entrepreneur in Ireland, represented the country, and did us very proud. So, Chris, do you want to talk to us just a little bit about what you got through that process? Because I know there was a lot of training, a lot of entrepreneurship, or a lot of mentorship. So even in the short space of the couple of days that we were there, what kind of things did you get out of it?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, even starting with the basics of getting to meet other, I suppose, peer entrepreneurs who maybe were 1 or 2 years ahead of us in the journey, that had been through so much in their time and had been through a lot of the challenges that we were experiencing at the time I was studying in college, and I suppose had some interesting decisions to make, but whether, and I suppose how to balance those two, whether leaving college was the right decision for me, and being able to speak to so many entrepreneurs, that were only a few years ahead of us, that had been in the competition a few years previously, was incredible just to hear those journeys. And also, I suppose, as part of the competition, we were assigned a mentor in Ireland and also an international mentor, and both of those mentors, in preparation for the competition, helping us to refine the pitch, those kind of experiences have stuck with us in the long run. Just, I suppose, in everything from raising funds to in sales pitches and so on, it's been a huge help to us.
So you're actually, and the reason that we wanted you to be here with us today is because you're ideally suited for this, because you've had, through the GSEA, you've had short-term mentors, and exactly as you talked about in the run-up to the competition. So there's how much you've gotten out of very focused, very intense 1, 2, or maybe even just 3 sessions to help you with a specific target or a specific task. And then your ongoing mentorship and your board of advisors and things like that. So I wanted to tease out a few of those things with you over the next 30 or 53 minutes or whatever it is, because we're going to have as much time for Q&A as we possibly can. So, first things first, building meaningful and impactful mentorships. So what do we mean by meaningful and impactful? So if I was to say to you, okay, we're gonna do some mentorship, you're gonna ask me questions and I'm gonna give you answers, and we're gonna go about our merry way, because I'm an amazing guru of entrepreneurship. I know it all. I'm just going to spew from on high, and then off you go. Do you think that's going to be all that meaningful or impactful? Have you had experience of that? Have you had any experience of that kind of stuff where you're asking a question and all you're getting is just, here's a quick short answer without taking the time to really understand the background of it?
Sorry, you cut off there for a second. My apologies, Stephen.
Sorry, I'm wondering, When we're talking about meaningful and impactful, have you ever been on the receiving end, maybe at an earlier stage in your entrepreneurship career, where instead of having those relationships and having that, you ask somebody a question and they just give you a bit of a throwaway, oh, here's a little bit of information, now off you go, without it being all that meaningful or impactful?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely a very true point. And one thing that I found from mentorships and relationships that I've had, and the ones that have been the most beneficial, have been the ones that you build a relationship with first. And I think that you get to know each other both on a personal and on a professional basis, and get to really understand, where they've come from, their experiences, and to know maybe where they might be able to help you. And I think, within that, vulnerability is really important. That, I think it's very important with a mentor that you can talk about the most personal things, that might be very difficult for you to be able to talk about your emotions as well, because it's just as important, as being able to talk about some of the skills and some of the business elements of it. It's being able to have that deep and meaningful relationship is actually very important.
I 100% agree with that, because I think as entrepreneurs, one of the things that we hear more often than not in EO and in Forum and things like that is our work-life balance. And really, for entrepreneurs, for startups, for people who are just driven by this passion to change the world, make a dent, put a dent in the universe, or whatever it is that we're doing, there isn't really all that much separation between how we're feeling and what we're doing. So having that full view of what we're doing, I think, is really, really important from a startup point of view. In a business or in a corporate point of view, it can be quite transactional, but from startups, I think it's more important to be fully rounded. There is a question that's come in. I think that's a really interesting one, and it's for you, Chris, because nobody wants to ask me questions. You're the young hot startup. What's the main lesson in your journey? So, what's the main thing that you've learned? Let's put this in a mentorship point of view from some of the mentors that you've come across and that you've worked with.
Yeah, so I suppose that's a very good question, and I suppose the number one thing that I think I've learned throughout the entirety of the several different mentorships we went through was that the challenges that we're experiencing have been experienced by someone else, and being able to go and actually learn from other people's mistakes first is actually often the right way to go about it. And I think that's, I don't know how many times and how many issues we've encountered, and Tony would be one of my EO advisors. Actually, he's on my board in my company as well, and has been there with us since pretty much day one. I think he joined maybe 3 or 4 months into our company journey, but there's so many times that he has been able to, we bring up an issue and you'd nearly be scared to bring up the issue, that whatever might have went wrong in some business environment, and 99% of the time he may not have experienced it in the exact same context, but will have had a similar experience that he can share with you. And that's always been the thing that, and often if you can't find it with your mentor that you're working with right now, that mentor can definitely help you to connect with someone who's had that issue that might be in a different industry, or maybe someone that might be in a similar industry to you as well. And I think that's always been the one thing, is to try and find someone who's experienced that problem or experienced something similar, and try and look at how they approached it, what worked for them, what didn't work, and how you can potentially apply that within your own business.
So just to put that in context, because people might have missed the name. So Tony is an EO member here in Ireland, and he's in a similar industry to Chris. So he's been acting on Chris's advisory board and as a mentor for Chris since Chris represented Ireland in the GSEA, and has been really, really engaged and really, I think, impactful. Yeah. I mean, really engaged, really impactful in your journey.
Absolutely, in so many ways, and I think both has been a professional and a personal sport for me as well, and I think that's part of the meaningful part of what we discussed before.
So obviously you've got Tony as one of your people. You actually have 2 EO people on your advisory board, and I'm aware of that. But how have you been able to find other mentors or other experts that you've been able to bounce ideas off, and being able to approach people to help you on your journey?
100%. And I always look up to my idols. That's or maybe people in my local area who've done something really different, or maybe had a business that's been quite successful. I would often go to Barry Lunn. He's probably, when we started off an innovation center here in Limerick, and it was a center that we had looked at and said, that we started off working there and looked at all the companies around us, and they were maybe in Oralis, they were 4 to 5 years, which was his company. They were 4 to 5 years ahead of us, and we looked at them and said, wow, that's a company we'd love to emulate, and that's something that we'd really like to do. And I think, I heard on the previous session, it was touched on that people love to talk with themselves. And I don't necessarily mean that about Barry in particular, but even just going up and saying, look, I'd love to hear the story about how, you guys secured that contract, or, how you guys came about, what did that mean? And just having those, I thought that was a really good piece of advice, to just actually let people talk and to hear their journey. They'll often be speaking at an event, go along to that event, stay behind after and have a drink with them and ask them all the questions you want to ask. And I found 99% of the time, people will want to help you. And the more that they see that you engage with the process, the more that they see that you ask questions and want to learn more, the more they actually want to help you. And I think entrepreneurship is one of those very unique industries that people appreciate. It's quite a lonely journey at times, and they've all been through that themselves at some point and will always want to help you. And I've very, very rarely I've had an experience where another entrepreneur is not being willing to give time and to help out. It's very, very rare that does happen.
So that was brilliant advice. It was a very Irish solution to an Irish problem, is to find them and meet them for a drink. But in general, that kind of socializing, that kind of network really helps. So your drink might be coffee.
Yes, exactly.
But in Ireland, it's usually something a little bit stronger. So one of the things, before we get into some of this, because you've touched on one or two of those topics that I think are really, really important, and I want people to be able to take some actionable stuff away from our session today. But I want to just touch on mentorship and coaching. Sometimes the two things are interchanged, and the two definitions, or people say mentorship, they mean coaching. They talk about coaching, they mean mentorship. When I was looking into this a couple of years ago, when I started on the journey of looking for a mentor for me and becoming a mentor for other people, really the only difference that I could see between a mentor and a coach was that a mentor was free and coaches you had to pay for. That's really the only difference I could find. But there are some fairly specific differences between the role of a mentor and the role of a coach. So the role of a mentor typically is somebody who has done it before, not exactly what you've done, but something really close or really similar, or just has done one part of your journey that you want to learn from, and they're willing to share their skills, their experience, and help you to develop and grow. So they're imparting knowledge and maybe showing you a little bit of the path. Whereas a coach is possibly somebody who's done it before, but a coach's role is really to bring out as much of your skills and to help you to develop your full potential. Usually from the sidelines, not as much involved in the day-to-day and the hands-on as a mentor. Now, obviously, anytime that we're mentoring or we're coaching or we're being mentored, we're being coached, the two things are in play. Sometimes you're coaching, sometimes you're mentoring. So the roles can become a little bit fudged. Chris, have you had much experience with maybe getting some coaching or getting some advice from people who might not have done exactly, not been in your world, but have done one part of what you're talking about, either from a business development point of view or from a technology point of view, or something that they've helped you, but they haven't necessarily done it themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's I think that's a great way to define a mentor and a coach. And I think sometimes the best mentors will actually use coaching as an exercise, even with their mentees, to try and actually to replicate that. And I think I discussed this with you before. We met for lunch or for dinner in Limerick there a few weeks ago, and even just talking through some of the new strategies we were taking in our product and some of the challenges we had. And I found with yourself, even you've been very effective sometimes, us just actually repeating back what we're saying, rephrasing it in a different light, asking us some questions on what we're doing. And you often come to your own conclusions on it. And, I had great experiences with EO and with obviously following on from GSEA, I was lucky enough to attend one of the coaching sessions in Dublin as well. And just learning about how to coach and also how to be coached. And I suppose two very different things. And even within our teams, which is, I know maybe not the relevancy of tonight, but being able to learn how to coach was also very effective with, when you've got team members that have issues, not stepping in and not, micromanaging and actually trying to develop those people. The two skill sets are very, very useful. And I have found that with mentorships that the best mentors will often use coaching as a tool and then say, right, okay, what do you think? And then say, okay, here's how I would have looked at it. And then you have the two perspectives, then you have your own conclusions, but you also then get a devil's advocate. And sometimes it's also important for the mentor to bring you to that self-conclusion and then maybe ask a load of questions that would maybe make you think the contrary, and to make sure that you're absolutely certain of what you believe or what you want. And those exercises can be really, really beneficial.
So basically you're saying that Tony and I are really difficult.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of you from Dublin. That is to be expected, you know.
One of the things that I really like what you touched on there is not only being a mentee and having a mentor maybe outside the business on your advisory board, but actually acting as your own internal coach and mentor, using the same skills with your own team. So followership and leadership. So have you used any of those techniques, or have you used any of that with your own team and helping them on board or develop or follow their own ideas to some kind of conclusion?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's something that I was probably very poor at until and it probably is something I'm still working on. But, you know, often when somebody comes with a problem, sometimes your kind of first reaction is to say, oh, we'll just do this and that'll fix it. But sometimes actually just taking a step back and saying, you know, actually, if we, you know, what do you think about this? And what is your biggest problem right now? How can I help you to overcome those? And just keep asking questions and maybe mirroring it back to them. It becomes very, very effective for them as a person. They develop an awful lot better. And it's a technique I think that I would love to master over the next few years. I think it's something of a lot of work to do on still, but it's something very, very, very interesting.
I've always liked the analogy, and I came across this through EO and through coaching and mentoring, is the angled desk. That when somebody comes into your office and puts their problem on your desk, you can talk to them, but it just rolls back to them.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, something has gone wrong with my camera here. So we have a question here from Victor. Do you need a coach or a mentor for different or every facet of your life? So do you need a coach or a mentor for every part of what you're doing and what you're building? Or do you have one coach that just looks after your entire business, or one mentor?
So that's actually a really good question, and I'm sure, Stephen, you have
actually Victor has about 69 questions in here at the moment. So Victor, we're going to get to as many of them as we can. Sorry, go on, Chris.
No, absolutely. But I think that just coming back to that, I think that there's sometimes I think it depends if for a coach can coach you on anything. I think a really good coach will be able to run through the process. There's a book on it. I can't remember the name of the book off the top of my head. Stephen, you might know what the book that EO uses for coaching with the 7 questions. Is that
the coaching habit?
That's it. Yes, that book is
Bungay, Charles Bungay, I think.
Yeah, it's excellent. Anyways, that book in terms of helping you with the process of how to coach. But with mentors, absolutely, having specific mentors can be very, very, very useful. I probably have 6 or 7 that I would go to for different things. So one of them might be just for what I would call my entrepreneurial things, where it might be a challenge of, you know, personal life clashing with the hectic work schedule, or having to travel and people maybe not, you know, stuff like that, the challenges that can bring about for family and friends and all of that. And then you know, I'd have other coaches then that might be for technical problems that might come up, or for software issues, and other coaches then that could help with business development, sales, marketing, or whatever the case would be. So absolutely, having a wide range of mentors can be hugely beneficial, and sometimes give you different perspectives. You might talk to one mentor and they'll tell you one thing, and another mentor will tell you the complete opposite, and having those alternating perspectives can really help sometimes.
And then picking which one you prefer and going with them, like figuring out at a young age which one of your parents was the soft touch when it came to going out on a Friday night.
Exactly.
Very good. So there's a couple of things that I want to just talk about. So Chris and I were talking about this, about some of the steps and things that are really important at actually finding a mentor and forming that relationship, and forming that two-way relationship between the mentee and the mentor. And I think Chris's point just there about different mentors for different things, or different coaches for different things, is really, really important. For the first one here is, what do you want? What is it you're looking to accomplish? Is it, I need to get my pitch deck right, so I need to speak to somebody who is an expert who can help me to really nail in that, or I need somebody who's going to help me develop my team, or I'm going to need somebody who's going to help me develop my vision. What is it that you're looking to get out of? What kind of information or help are you looking to get from a mentor? Do you have anything to add to that, Chris?
No, absolutely. I think that's, again, it's having that wide range of mentors available to help. And exactly as you said, I think I can even point to some examples ourselves that we would have some people for strategy, actually, and some people are very good at operationally. I think that's probably one of the biggest and probably most important ones, is that you don't go to a strategist for an operational thing, or an operational thing to a strategist, because I think that they're two very key areas. I think that straight away I would always have in the back of my mind about, because every every nail will look like, or everything looks like a nail to a hammer, as they say.
Absolutely. I try to remember who it was. I think it was either Rockefeller or one of these guys in the US that used to have a row of buttons, and he didn't know the answer to everything, but he knew exactly who he needed to ask to find the answer to whatever question the company was having. It was Ford or Rockefeller or one of these places. If you know who I'm talking about, because it's probably something that you've heard about before, put it in the chat, and hopefully somebody will be able to, Daniel will be able to share with me, and we'll be able to share the names so you can look that up, because it's really, really important. The next thing about this is the fact that this is a two-way relationship. Now, in the last talk, Janvi and Balint, apologies if I've mispronounced your names, you were talking about going to networking events, and you were talking about going up and talking to people. And I think that's really, really important. And Chris touched on this as well. Chris is Irish, so he went straight to the alcohol and said, meet them in the bar. But having that relationship, and it's not just a take. It's a really, really important part of this to know that the mentor is actually getting something out of this for themselves, and they're actually getting something from this relationship. It's not just I'm going to do a brain dump down into you of all of my information and experience. Now, Chris, you've had a couple of different mentors, varying from industries and varying from specializations. How would you describe the different relationships that you've had with these people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even with I suppose Tony was one of our first mentors, but regularly would meet him for coffees, lunches, and obviously less with COVID because of everything that was going on. But having those, I really think that to stress that the personal element is very important. That when you get to know, I think the first few are always going to be those kind of awkward sessions where you're still kind of everyone's on best behavior and it's the hello kind of everyone's being all polite with each other. But I think after a while, when you get comfortable with someone, it nearly moves to WhatsApp and you're sending jokes back and forth and there's gifts flying left, right, and center. And I think that's how a lot of relationships end up going. I think during lockdown with one or two of my mentors in particular, would have met them for walks. And again, I'm making myself sound like a terrible alcoholic here, but with one in particular would have went for walks, and when the pubs opened for takeaway pints, we would have been, had a pint to go for a walk. And it would have been great just to actually have those one-to-one conversations, or where I find sometimes the best learnings come from, and you actually can ask questions that you may not feel comfortable asking in other scenarios, and you can, really delve into some of the most challenging, I think some of the best learnings you get from your mentors are when they maybe messed up or they had something really difficult happen to them. And it's, in those scenarios that they'll probably feel the most comfortable to tell you those things and that you can actually learn from them. So I think that is, a really, really important, and really important element of mentorship is that you do get that comfort and get, I suppose, that close with someone. I'm sure, I think I've started, maybe not the same level that you guys do, doing some mentorship myself. And I think you do get an awful lot out of that being able to maybe make sure someone else doesn't make the same mistakes you do down the line, and seeing them succeed is obviously the benefit within that.
Perfect. Sorry, I'm seeing one or two of the questions coming in. I think that's really, really important, and having that clarity and having that relationship is really, really important. Some of the questions that are coming in actually are going to touch on what we're talking about next, which is the who you're looking for. So when we get clear on what we want, what is it that we're trying to develop? What is it that we're trying to, what part of our skill set are we trying to grow? Then this is when we start looking at who are we looking for. So who have we researched? So for Chris, for example, he might find somebody locally. He might find somebody in a proper city like Dublin. He might find people who are able to help him in a way that he might not be able to get access to in his local network of entrepreneurs. And we had a question just a minute ago. What if you want to, from Mazid? Apologize, Mazid. I'm not going to try and pronounce your second name. What if we want to have a startup, but we do not have a problem in mind? How do we need to go about this? So, and I think to get some kind of a mentor, to get somebody who has launched a couple of programs, who has do a bit of research, who has started up a couple of companies, who has launched a couple of startups, what have they learned? And then approaching them and asking them, what is it we want? I want some clarity. I want some ideas and some how to validate my idea. And then what are you looking for? I'm looking for, look, I just want 2 or 3 sessions, 2 or 3 coffees to bounce some ideas off. You share your information with me. I'll pay for lunch. It could be as simple as that, or you could be looking for a co-founder. So when you're looking for somebody, when you've figured out what it is that you want, Chris, how would you go about finding or creating that short list of people that these are the people that I want to see if I can get some mentorship from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'd start first off with my own network and see who do I know within my network that, and sometimes even just starting a LinkedIn, seeing who you're connected with, or maybe on Twitter, and just having to think about who could help me with this problem, who do I know in this area, and could they help me? And maybe sometimes you'll find, okay, maybe I'm not sure if that's the right person. So I'd have a conversation with some of my existing mentors, or I'd have a conversation with someone, even someone in your family who might know. So yeah, and just say, look, I'm looking for someone that's done whatever the case would be. Maybe it was raised around investment. Do you know anyone that's ever done that? And just starting with them, talking to them, and really just, again, just having those really, I think, vulnerable moments and saying, look, I'm really stuck with this. I have no idea where to start. And people actually will a lot of times relate to that, because there was a point for everyone where they never knew what they were doing. And that really does help, just actually sit down and say, right, okay, that's what I need. And I have no idea how to get there. And that often, I think, is one of the best steps to take towards that.
I think you're being very kind by saying that everyone has that one time when they didn't know what they were doing. I think most entrepreneurs have that feeling every 2 or 3 hours, going, what am I doing that helped me?
Don't reveal all of our secrets now, Stephen. That's
No, we're at Startup Grind. We're all about entrepreneurship, and we may as well tell people.
Absolutely.
Nobody's got it figured out. Even the entrepreneurs who are acting as mentors, all they can do is tell you what they've done, and it's up to you to figure out what you want to do with that information.
100%.
So Victor is on again asking about, and it's a very similar thing about how do we find those mentors, especially if we're in a space where it's either a fairly new space, so there aren't a lot of people that have built a lot of experience in that space, or what was the other one? If there are not enough professionals or not enough people in your network, how do you find those people? Now, Chris, you mentioned LinkedIn there. How would you go about doing something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first off, when, to come back to the first part in that question about there not being someone who's done it before, but there are loads of people who've done something that hasn't been done before, or perhaps have done something similar in a different industry, or there's always someone. So, and I think sometimes being ambitious with who you want to talk to is sometimes really helpful. I love the Steve Jobs story that he told about when he was 12 years of age. I think it was HP or IBM or one of the computer companies at the time. He literally got out the yellow book and found the CEO of the company and rung them and said, is there any chance I could have some free computer parts? And, just being that cheeky sometimes is actually the most effective strategy, and just reaching out directly. Sometimes you'd be surprised how often people would respond to a LinkedIn response that just says, hey, I'm a young, old, whatever the case may be, entrepreneur from a small city in Ireland. Is there any chance we could have a 15-minute Zoom call? I really want to ask you a question about this, and this. I would say you'd be surprised. It might take 100 messages to 100 different people, but sometimes you get 100 maybe back that will actually respond to you, and that one introduction could change everything for your business. So I think it's just a matter of being persistent and definitely following up as well, because sometimes you'll find that people won't respond to the first message. They may not respond to the second, but they'll start responding after 3 or 4 because it's getting very annoying. So sometimes being a little bit persistent too, and asking, but obviously doing it in a very respectful way, not being kind of the same message over and over again, just maybe explaining why you need to talk to them. And I think showcasing your passion for what you're doing, people will always relate to that. And I think if you're passionate enough about what you're doing and what you want to solve, I think people will always try and make time for you as much as they can,
Well, I think you've given us a perfect segue then to the next bit, which is the step up, is actually to start contacting these people. And I think you touched on something as well, which I think is really, really important. Some mentors and some entrepreneurs, look, we're all up to our eyes. Everybody is juggling all kinds of everything. We've no time for anything. So somebody else asking us for more of our time just feels like, gee, do I have to listen to this person for the next hour every second week? Starting off with something small, and that 15-minute, look, can I buy you a coffee if I'm locally, or can we have a 15-minute Zoom call? That's all I want, and I will be respectful of your time. Can give you an amazing leg up. And as you said, Chris, even if that person is not the right person, and Victor, if that person is not the right person that has the experience, they might know somebody. And if you've been respectful of their time, and you've done your homework, and you've done a little bit of research about them, they know that you're a serious entrepreneur, there's somebody who's passionate about what you're doing. More often than not, I found they're quite willing to open their network and see if they can introduce you to somebody else. And then it's coming from them, not you cold emailing them from LinkedIn.
I think that's a really good point as well, Stephen, on that sometimes if you want to get to someone, and I will always look from connecting with someone on LinkedIn to see if I have mutual connections with them, because that's always a great way to get to speak with someone. If And even from my own perspective, if someone reached out to me and said, look, will you talk to this person? They're a good person. They're trying to do this. They're, just trying to get a leg up, and they're just trying to get started. You're much, much more inclined to respond to that than you are to respond to just a cold message. So sometimes looking at who's connected with them, or who could you maybe get to that isn't connected with them, that can maybe help you to get in that door. But definitely warm introductions are a big help in that.
And we, being Irish, we are very used to the expression of, if you don't ask, you don't get. The worst they can do is ignore you. They're not going to threaten you or anything like that, so long as you're being respectful. Absolutely. And it's just a couple of questions. Ask. You never know what's going to happen. So the stepping up is really important. And actually stepping up, So the stepping up is really important. But we need to be as clear as we can. We need to say, look, we want a finite amount of time. And what is it we want? Why are we contacting you? Why are you contacting this person? What is it in their resume and in their history that you're trying to tap into? And why should they give a damn? So you're being as, it's not a, I'm not talking about being as direct as you might be on something like Tinder or Grindr or something. I'm married a long time. I don't know how those things work, I swear. But being direct and to the point, because you don't want to be wasting time. You don't want to be dancing around and they go, oh, this is just a spammy email. But stepping up and actually asking, you'd be amazed at how often you'll get a positive response. So then the last one, so this is about actually running the relationship and about organizing the meetings, being ready, being prepared, making sure that we have, whether it's a 6-month commitment, a 12-month, whatever it is that you've agreed or the mentor and the mentee have agreed, then it's up to the mentee to take charge of it. The mentee has to take on the responsibility of making sure that the meetings are booked, or if you're meeting physically in a place for lunch, that the lunch place is booked. You have to make sure that you've done the work, you've done the research, you've showed anything that you need to give beforehand for the mentor to look at before your meeting. It's all on you. Now, Chris, you've done this both sides as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I think even just simple things like you said, just sending out the calendar invite. I think those things really help as well. That it makes it very. And I think even one other thing that I probably did wrong when I was looking for mentors first was I'd always say, let me know a time that suits you. It's actually way easier if someone comes to you and says, how about these 4 times? Which one works better? Because you can just pick a time and go, that time, that day, that works. And I think that's actually one small thing that I found really helpful. Instead of just saying whenever suits means you have to open the calendar and try and see what time will work. And then you're going back and there's a chance that doesn't work for the other person. So sometimes just actually suggesting 4 times, even small things like that, make a huge difference.
So one of the things that I actually do is, as a mentor, so I'm involved, I'm an investor and a mentor in a couple of different programs at the moment, is I have a Calendly link that is a hidden link, which is just for that company, and it has full access to my calendar. So it's, look, whenever it suits, rather than the dancing back and forth of what about this date and what about this time, it's like, boom, there, choose whether it's Zoom or choose whether it's in person. If it's in person, obviously there's buffers and all the rest of it. So taking charge. So we had another question in about getting into programs like these. Are we supposed to have our own problem and ideas and a co-founder? So every entrepreneur, every company, every startup is different, whether it's a mix of, so in Chris's case, one can only describe them as 3 best friends who to this day are working. I mean, it's amazing to watch the 3 of these guys working together, all unique strengths that all come together on a shared vision. And it's amazing to watch it. I love going into their office. You could be a solo entrepreneur, you could be 2 co-founders, you could be a couple of people on a collective. It's entirely up to you how you want to run your business. But one of the pieces of advice that I've heard time and time again that I hate and I think is utter rubbish is find something you love doing and you'll never work a day in your life. That's crap. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this. I'm Irish, so the best advice that you can have as an entrepreneur is find a problem that annoys you and fix it, because there will always be another thing that you need to fix. So having that problem be big enough that you have to constantly fix it, then you'll always be working and you'll be solving the world's problems. Chris, you did exactly that in your business. and this is how you guys started. Do you want to give us a quick overview of how you guys started and what right you wrong and what wrong you right in the world?
Absolutely. So I suppose I'll touch on what we did and what we're now doing. So I unfortunately throughout my youth was in the hospital probably 14 or 15 times for different injuries, mostly sports related and mostly only involved the cast, thank God. But saw the problems in our healthcare system in Ireland and some of the challenges around the efficiencies. So we worked with our local hospital to try and help them track patients as they move through the flow and try to really understand those problems. And that was where we came about from. Obviously, that the company has evolved and grown, and we're, I suppose, three young 24, 25-year-olds now, getting old. But it's one of the biggest problems we see right now is climate change, and we're really frustrated with all of the many issues that are happening there, particularly around the plastic that's ending up in the ocean, and that's one key challenge that we said, look, what can we solve and what part can we actually fix it in that? And I think when you're passionate about it, and often we bring it back to our values and to what and I suppose our mission and our vision as a company. And sometimes when you have a really difficult decision, it actually just is a case of coming back to your values and a case of coming back to your vision and saying, right, do we really need to do this project? Is it going to contribute to us putting less plastic in the ocean or whatever the case may be? So absolutely, that's I think it's great advice that having a problem that irritates you and it maybe makes you a little bit angry is a great thing,
Yeah, you want the problem to make you angry, not your co-founders. So there's a couple of people here talking about how being specific and what have short meetings and have a note and have an explanation and to keep it as specific as possible. Really good advice. A couple of people who have obviously tried that and have gotten it to work for them. So Chris has been a mentor and a mentee. I'm in a very lucky position that I've also been a mentor and a mentee, and I actually, when I was asked to do this, I actually pinged a message to my mentor, who's this guy, Carl Funke. He's from Germany, built a huge business, and he's one of the nicest, most down-to-earth guys you'll ever meet. And when we first started working together, it was very much, I was trying to figure out my why. I was trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. I was at kind of a crossroads, whether I sell the business, buy another business, set up another business, what do I do? So it started off as a very structured kind of 6-month program that we got to know each other. We got to really help each other out on different ways of looking at the world. And he was giving me his experience shares and some advice and probing questions. I was also giving him some different perspectives on some of the issues that he was facing. So we started our mentor-mentee relationship probably about 5 years ago. And we're still regularly in touch with each other. I've gone over to visit him and stay in his place in Germany. He's come over to visit me in Spain and in Ireland. So it started off very much as a very finite why, like what was it that I wanted to accomplish from this? But it grew into a much more meaningful and very impactful relationship for me. And some of the stuff that I've gotten from leadership development and improving the way that I run my business has come immensely from Carl. But I've also gotten a lot of mentorship from a wide range of people throughout the industry, usually for very short bursts where I want to improve something, as Chris had mentioned before. You're on mute, Chris.
My apologies. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's very true as well, just about the short bursts as well, that you will find that you'll have a certain mentor for a certain period of time just working with you on those issues. So
these are the points we want to take away. So if people want to take a screenshot or write them down if there's any questions, we've about 15, maybe a little bit shy of 20 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, if there's anything else that's on your mind about mentorship, about being a mentor, being a mentee, finding a mentor, or even finding a mentee or figuring out those skills, please pop them in the chat, because we'd love to have a conversation. We'd love to see if we can get some other ideas rolling. So Chris, here's a question actually about the leadership styles of the three of you. So yourself, Fiona and Owen, the three co-founders of the business, very different personalities.
Absolutely.
So would engage very differently with the staff. So would you find that you might be a better mentor or coach for some topics and fun for others, or helping people to develop? And how would you define those types of things?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, look, Fionn is very detail oriented. Fionn is our operations manager and our chief operations officer, should I say. But anything that's detail oriented, process oriented, Fionn is definitely the go-to guy in terms of devising a strategy, the strategies around that are very operationally focused. I'm probably the ideas person in the company, so it's very much the big picture, thinking about trying to focus on what matters is what I would say a lot, and trying to focus on the big pieces. And then Owen is, I always say, the brains behind the operation. So if you have something really technically challenging, or something that's really, really intellectual, or something that's quite requires a high powered brain, that Owen is definitely the guy to go to in those scenarios. But and I think you're dead right. It's knowing and not being, I think, too sensitive about that, and knowing what your area that you're good at is, and sticking to your kind of area, knowing and trusting your co-founders, or trusting even your teammates in some regards. We've great, obviously, thankfully, as a company, we've grown. We've got a senior leadership team now, which is a new thing for us over the last year and a half, and having those people come in that have years of experience, more than we do, and being able to bring that, those wise heads into the company has been a huge help for us. To be able to mentor more people coming along. So it's just knowing, again, picking your tool for the problem, and knowing when it's the right time to actually give some advice, and knowing when sometimes the best mentorship you can give someone is saying, I actually know this person who's really, really good, and you should talk to them. And that's sometimes the best, and just knowing that the right amount of advice to give in certain scenarios can be really beneficial.
Very good. And what about if things don't go well? If there isn't the chemistry there, you've met for one or two sessions. I don't know if this has happened to you, or if it's happened to people that you know of, but let's say you've found the right person, you've reached out to them, you've stepped up, you know who you're looking for, or you thought you knew who you're looking for, you know what you want, and they're just, it's not the relationship, it's just them either giving you advice that you think is wrong, or doesn't fit with your values, or doesn't fit with how you should be running your business. What would you do in that scenario?
That's a really, really, really good question. So I actually had a conversation with a mentor who very recently, who I would have perhaps met before for mentorship sessions, and it wouldn't have. So I met this person 3 or 4 years ago, and I'll give two different examples here, because there's scenarios where that's true and scenarios where it's not. So it's important to address both. But with this particular mentor, met him a few years ago, and was a total clash. I felt he didn't understand where we were going, didn't understand the vision of the company, didn't understand things, and probably had a little bit of an ego back at that stage as well, and still do. By no means denying that, but had a very much didn't take criticism well. And I think that years later, met that person and realized actually it was me that was the issue all along. But sometimes that's actually what you need, is someone that can approach you properly, and actually, I've had with this particular mentor, I now actually meet them regularly for coffee, and find them quite good, and realizing that sometimes when they criticize you, it's actually, it's coming from a good place, and that they actually want to see you succeed. And that's one scenario that sometimes maybe take a look at it. If it's not working, maybe look internally first and say, look, am I maybe doing something wrong here? Am I maybe listening to what they're saying? Am I getting offended? Am I letting my ego get in the way? Just actually addressing that first. But sometimes you're dead right. And I have had scenarios where mentors have definitely been the wrong person for me. And it may just be something as simple as a personality clash, or it could be that they, maybe looked at an industry 20 years previously, and, the experience might not be the same because the world has maybe changed, or whatever the case may be. So it's just knowing to say, look, appreciate your advice, and thank you for that. You've really helped me along. And I would definitely end things on a good note, because like I said, you will never know how 3 or 4 years later you might be eating your words and taking them as a mentor again, So just one thing to be careful of, for sure.
So like any good breakup, it's not you, it's me.
Exactly. Yeah. Always.
I can't stand you. So we have another question here. And again, it comes back to how many mentors, and should we have mentors for each of the different verticals, or each of the different parts of our business? So an operations mentor, or should we have generalists? Now, I have a view on this. But I'd love to know what yours is, because again, you touched on the 3 co-founders, and the 3 of you have very different strengths, which all support each other. But my guess is that the type of mentor that works for you wouldn't work for Owen, for example.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I think that I think with mentors too, and picking them, it's important to go to someone who's succeeded at it and someone who's failed at it. I think that generally is 2 things I would always look for is. who's done this, who's not, and succeeded, who's done it and hasn't succeeded, and understanding both perspectives, because you could end up in the side where you would try to do it and you mightn't succeed at it, and it's important to know that, what are the consequences of that, how does that affect you, and so on. So that's always something we would look for with mentors, is to try and get both sides of the coin, and to get a really rounded approach to it. But absolutely, Owen, Fiona, and me would need three totally different types of mentors, and we do have our own mentors. And I think as well, it's good that you don't necessarily go to the same people. If you co-founders and in that dynamic, those relationships outside of your business are vital for the health of your relationship as co-founders. And I always find that you can go and have chats through issues that you're maybe having, and having those external relationships to sometimes just someone who's a total fresh perspective can help you to be the best co-founder you can be for your teammates, and can be a really, really big help, I think. So, and again, personalities need to match. There needs to be that. There's nothing worse than if you're getting mentorship for someone you don't like or you don't get on with, and that's very important that you actually generally like the person. And I don't mean that from, someone could be the most successful person in the world, they could have achieved a million things, but if you don't get on, there's no point in even spending any time with them, because you're not going to take what they say in for where it's coming from. And definitely, I think as well, making sure that person's intentions and understanding what they are, because sometimes you'll find that you can be getting advice from someone, if they're connected to your business in any way, whether that's, as an investor or whether that's as something else, you do have to factor that into the advice they're giving you. And it's very important to think about that, or if it's from, advice from someone who might be motivated based on the outcome of it, or whatever the case be. So it's very important you base your advice and look at where someone's coming from with the advice too. That sometimes it's not always perfectly true.
Very good. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Sometimes there are unconscious biases, and there are ulterior motives. Yeah. And unfortunately, the world would be a much easier place if people weren't involved. But so we have another question in, somebody who says that we both come across as very charismatic and lovable people, and everyone would love to talk to us. Obviously,
we have been fools, Stephen.
Has already been drinking. But what about if you're not as extroverted as we probably are, or you don't have it in the Irish blood to be able to go out and start talking to people all the time? How do we go about finding mentors in that scenario? Now, I have a view on this, but I'd love to hear yours first.
Of course, yeah. So, funnily enough, actually, we've done a series of personality tests as founders over the last 2 or 3 years. Weirdly, Fionn was introverted in some and extroverted in others. So Fionn is probably somewhere in between, and Owen would be introverted. So Owen, and very much probably is the guy to ask about this. But he, I think that it's one of those things that you just have to put yourself out there and really, take those steps. And I know it's probably a lot easier I'm definitely an extroverted person. I think that's close enough to, I think, 97% in most of the tests. So I'm a very extroverted person. So I do enjoy conversations with other people. But even just taking those steps and just reminding yourself of why you're doing it, what the purpose is for it, and knowing that it's going to drive benefits for you, I think is really important. But I suppose that is very easy for me to say from an extroverted perspective, for sure.
I shared something the other day, which is a pie chart of how introverts make friends. So 10% of introverts don't make friends. 90% of introverts met an extrovert who liked them and adopted them. So look, I'm from a naturally extroverted kind of person, but there are a lot of scenarios where I'm very introverted. So I mean, I actually disagree with because I do a lot of personality. I'm a personality profiler as part of my role in leadership development. So an introvert or an extrovert, it's an omnivert is what most people are. So to that person who was asking about if you're not naturally extroverted and naturally confident in putting yourself out there, well, you don't have to put yourself out there in video form, or you don't have to be putting yourself out there on a video call all the time. You can start by sending a couple of well-written messages on LinkedIn. And exactly what Chris was talking about, like finding the list of people who have done what you want to do, especially people who have done it and who are not seeking the limelight, who are not the attention-seeking so-and-sos that Chris and I are. I know I'm blaming you for all the bad stuff. Chris is not an attention-seeking gombeen. I am. But
I know. I think we're both in that boat.
Writing those letters and writing those messages can actually help get you set up. And having that as text, it gives you the barrier and it allows you to think about your answers. So you don't have to be cracking jokes and keeping people entertained. You can be really open and honest. And you'd be amazed when you find a connection with somebody that's also in that scenario or has overcome that or recognizes themselves in that, you'll be able to get over that, and you'll be able to find the right people for you. So we've only got a few minutes left. We've got another one. How can I start my entrepreneur journey? I love this. So Chris, how can people start their entrepreneur journey?
I think coming back to the piece of advice that so I will really quickly touch on this. But so before we started Tracworx, the previous company we worked on failed miserably, and it was a camera system for drones analyzing fields for farmers. And a really quick synopsis of that was that we didn't look at the market, we didn't look at the customer's problem and how it actually solved a financial problem for someone. And I think that's probably the first thing that I would look at is what's the problem that you're solving. And I think you touched on that a while ago, Stephen, is that, and often if it's a problem that you're experiencing or feeling yourself, that's probably the most important thing. So definitely that is something I would encourage everyone to do, and to analyze that problem financially too, because at the end of the day, it's a business that you will be starting, and you will find out very quickly that if it's not a big enough financial pain for someone, and financial pain could be something that will ultimately cost them. It might be like that it increases safety, which maybe reduces their insurance premium or something like that. There has to be some, or increases quality of product, or which ultimately increases sales or something like that. There has to be a financial benefit to it. I think that's probably the most important thing, and definitely stick to something you're passionate about. This some problem that irritates you an awful lot too, that you'll stick with it, because it gets hard and lonely at times. So it's important that whatever you're doing, that you really care about it and you want to succeed at it.
I think that's all absolutely spot on. The only other thing that I would add to that is becoming an entrepreneur and fixing a problem. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be building €1 million, €100 million, or the next Facebook or the next Apple or something like that. You could be an entrepreneur and solve a problem and have a small team. You can be a solopreneur. You can be working for yourself. You can be doing something, fixing the world in your way, or adding something that you are adding to the world without necessarily building this enormous business. And you're still going to be an entrepreneur. You're still going to be living your dream, and you're still going to be able to have your own control of your own destiny. And I think that's really important. That I've been a huge fan. I started my first venture when I was about 9 years old. I was drawing comic books, photocopying them. My parents, I've grown up in an entrepreneurial house. We had a photocopier at home. I probably used about €1 or 50 cents worth of paper and sold the comics for 5 cents. So I've learned a lot about economics since then. But just doing something that scratches your itch and fixes a wrong, you can do it on a small scale and still be really, really happy and get a lot out of it. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. So somebody has said, the Scottish love pints as well. Yes. So the Scots and the Irish have a lot in common, except you spell whiskey wrong. There's an E in whiskey, which is, and you only distill it twice, whereas in Ireland we do it 3 times. But that's a conversation that we should have in a pub. So does anybody else have any last minute questions? Is there something we can help anybody with, or is there something on your mind about mentorship or about finding the right relationship? If not, don't worry about it. We won't be offended. Chris and I are from Global Student Entrepreneur Awards, EO. We're one of the sponsors here of the Students Summit. Really, really had a good time. Now, Chris and I always enjoy talking to Chris, and I meet Chris fairly regularly. I love finding out about what he's up to. And the other thing that, and I will tell you, people who are a bit nervous about mentors and reaching out to experienced entrepreneurs, I'm a little bit older than Chris. But I actually get a huge amount from mentoring young entrepreneurs like Chris and like startups, because for me, I get to see a perspective that I don't normally have access to. Chris sees the world in a very different way than I do. He has a different way of looking at problems, and he has different problems that when I look at his problems through my lens, I can also find solutions to other problems that are not connected. So you would be surprised what the mentor gets out of this relationship. So don't be afraid to ask, because a lot of people will be more than happy to learn for themselves while sharing with the mentees.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing too is that, if you're stuck for if you are maybe shy about it, don't be shy to reach out to either Stephen or myself on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever the case may be. And if we can connect you up with someone that we think might help solve your problem, by all means, might be a good place to start. But absolutely feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. So listen, everybody, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us for this session. Thanks very much to Startup Grind and the Student Summit for hosting us and for sharing this information. I think it's really, really energizing and engaging. I love the fact that we have these kind of networks to be able to help startups to be able to learn and grow from each other. So thanks very much, everybody. And hopefully we will all see you somewhere in 3D in person once we're all able to travel again. Have a good evening.